The Xel'Nari fleet moved through the void like a massive storm, their warships dark and menacing, engines humming with raw power. They were feared across the galaxy, conquerors who had never known defeat. Hundreds of vessels, each armed with devastating firepower, advanced in perfect formation, their hulls reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Their latest target was a human warship stationed in a contested sector, an insult to their dominance. The Xel'Nari warlords had crushed entire civilizations for less. Destroying a single human vessel would be nothing more than a message, a reminder to the galaxy that no one could stand against them. Their admirals watched their displays with smug satisfaction. Victory was inevitable. On the bridge of the command ship, Grand Warlord Koresh observed the human warship's position with growing irritation. The enemy vessel had not moved. It simply floated in space as if unaware of the doom approaching. A single warship against an unstoppable fleet, Koresh almost felt insulted. Did the humans not understand what they were facing? He had seen planets burn, fleets reduced to wreckage, and rulers kneeling before the might of the Xel'Nari. He had expected resistance, perhaps an attempt at escape, but instead the humans simply waited. It was as if they believed they had a chance. Amused by their arrogance, Koresh signaled his second-in-command, Commander Rethok. "Send a message," he ordered, his voice filled with confidence. "Tell the humans they have one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will erase them from existence." Aboard the human warship, HSS. Valiant, Captain Elias Carter listened to the transmission with calm indifference. The message was laced with arrogance, filled with threats that meant nothing to him. The Xel'Nari had made a fatal mistake. They believed they were facing just another primitive species, another weak force to crush beneath their might. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The Valiant was no ordinary warship. It was humanity's most advanced vessel, a prototype built with technology that no alien empire had ever seen. It had been designed for one purpose: to fight and win against overwhelming odds. Every system on the ship, every weapon, every defense, had been carefully engineered to counter superior numbers. Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. His crew was silent, their hands steady as they monitored enemy movements. There was no fear, no hesitation. They had trained for this moment. The Xel'Nari received no response. Koresh frowned, his irritation turning into anger. Did the humans think silence would save them? With a wave of his clawed hand, he ordered the fleet forward. Massive battleships moved into attack formation. The humans had wasted their only chance. "Fire!" Koresh commanded, and the void lit up with destruction. A storm of plasma and energy beams surged toward the Valiant, enough firepower to annihilate a moon. The Xel'Nari watched with satisfaction, expecting the human warship to be obliterated in seconds. But then, something impossible happened. The Valiant remained untouched. The Xel'Nari weapons, powerful enough to reduce fleets to scrap, simply vanished before reaching their target. Some shots curved off course. Some were absorbed by invisible defenses, and others simply flickered out of existence. The Xel'Nari admirals stared in stunned silence, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. No ship, no fleet, no civilization had ever done this before. The Valiant was still there, undamaged, unmoving, like a silent predator watching its prey. Koresh's amusement vanished, replaced by something he had never felt before: unease. He snapped toward his officers. "Increase firepower. Overload the cannons if you have to. Destroy that ship." The fleet obeyed instantly. More weapons powered up, more energy was unleashed. The void turned into a maelstrom of destruction, a storm of fire and fury. And yet, the Valiant remained untouched, unshaken. It had not even returned fire. It was simply watching. On the human warship, Captain Carter glanced at his displays, studying the enemy fleet. They were panicking. He could see it in their patterns, in the way their formation shifted, in the desperate way they fired without control. They had expected an easy victory, but now they were uncertain. That was the first step toward their downfall. Carter exhaled slowly before giving the first real order of the battle. "Target their flagship," he said. "One shot." The Valiant fired. There was no dramatic buildup, no extended exchange of fire. A single projectile, moving faster than the eye could follow, launched from the Valiant's railgun. It tore through space, unstoppable, unrelenting. The Xel'Nari flagship, a massive fortress of metal and power, exploded in an instant. No warning, no struggle, just destruction. The bridge of the Xel'Nari fleet went silent as their command ship disintegrated before their eyes. The explosion sent debris scattering into the void, the wreckage of what was once their greatest warship drifting lifelessly. Koresh had no time to react. One moment, he was aboard a ship of unmatched power. The next, he was gone. Panic spread through the fleet like wildfire. The Xel'Nari were warriors, conquerors, but they had never faced something like this. Their confidence shattered, their sense of superiority crumbling. The Valiant had barely moved, had barely fired, and yet their leader was dead, their strongest ship destroyed in a single instant. The admirals, once arrogant, now hesitated. They had challenged a lone human warship. And now, for the first time in their history, they realized they might lose. Captain Carter watched the chaos unfold on his screen. He did not smile, did not gloat. The battle had only just begun. The Xel'Nari had come expecting victory. Now, they would learn what it truly meant to challenge humanity. The HFY Valiant floated silently in the dark void of space, a lone warship standing against the might of the Xel'Nari fleet. Its sleek black hull reflected the distant stars, giving it an almost ghostly appearance. Inside, Captain Elias Carter sat in the command chair, his eyes scanning the battle displays with unwavering focus. The Xel'Nari, a race that had never known defeat, had brought an armada to crush a single ship. They believed numbers alone would guarantee victory. They were wrong. The Valiant was no ordinary vessel. It was the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. Designed for war, engineered to counter overwhelming odds, and equipped with technology no alien empire had ever seen. It was a weapon unlike any other. And today, it stood alone against an entire fleet. Around Carter, his crew worked with disciplined efficiency, their hands moving over controls with the precision of seasoned veterans. There was no fear on their faces, only quiet determination. They had trained for this moment, had prepared for battles where the enemy outnumbered them 100-1. The Xel'Nari had no idea what they were facing. Their fleet, vast and powerful, moved closer, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. They believed they had already won. Carter could almost hear their arrogance in the way their ships maneuvered, in the way they formed a battle line, as if this was a ceremonial execution rather than a real fight. The fleet's command ship transmitted another demand for surrender. The message was long, filled with threats and boasts of Xel'Nari supremacy. Carter didn't bother to respond. Instead, he gave a single order: shields at full capacity. Stand by for combat. The first shots came in a blinding wave of destruction. Plasma bolts the size of buildings, energy beams powerful enough to carve through mountains, all of it rained down upon the Valiant. Any other ship would have been vaporized instantly, reduced to debris drifting in space. But as the barrage hit, something unexpected happened. The Valiant remained untouched. Its shields shimmered, absorbing every blast with an ease that defied logic. The Xel'Nari fleet continued firing, their admirals certain that their sheer firepower would eventually break through. But the human warship did not falter. It stood like an immovable fortress, a lone guardian against an unstoppable storm. The Xel'Nari hesitated. They had never faced an enemy who could withstand their full might without taking damage. Confusion rippled through their fleet. This was not how battles were supposed to go. This was not how war was supposed to be fought. Carter watched them struggle to understand what was happening. The Valiant sensors detected irregular movements in their fleet, minor shifts in formation, hesitation in their attacks. They were unsure, afraid even. And fear was a weakness. Target their destroyer formation, Carter ordered, his voice calm. The ship's weapons powered up with a deep hum, and then, with a single shot, the Valiant struck. The railgun fired a projectile moving at incredible speed, A slug of dense metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed. It crossed the void in an instant and tore through the nearest Xel'Nari destroyer like paper. One moment, the ship was there. The next, it was gone, ripped apart in a flash of fire and debris. The explosion sent shockwaves through the fleet, not just physical ones, but psychological as well. The Xel'Nari, a race that had never lost, had just watched one of their warships be obliterated by a single human shot. Panic began to spread. The fleet's admirals scrambled to adjust their strategy, to form a new plan. They ordered evasive maneuvers, commanded their ships to spread out, to overwhelm the Valiant from multiple angles. It was a logical move, a strategy that had worked against every enemy they had ever faced. But the Valiant was not like their previous enemies. It adapted. Its advanced AI calculated every movement of the Xel'Nari fleet, predicting their strategies before they could even execute them. Its weapons, powerful and precise, fired with devastating accuracy. Every shot counted. Every impact was lethal. Another destroyer exploded. Then, a battleship. Then, a cruiser. One by one, the Xel'Nari fleet was being dismantled, their ships turned into wreckage floating through space. On the Xel'Nari command ship, the remaining admirals watched in horror as their mighty fleet was reduced to ruins. Their weapons were useless, their numbers meant nothing, and their greatest warships were being destroyed as if they were nothing more than training drones. This was not war. This was slaughter. For the first time in their history, the Xel'Nari faced an enemy they could not defeat. The Valiant was more than just a ship. It was a force of destruction beyond anything they had ever encountered. And it was only just beginning. Captain Carter observed the battlefield, his expression unreadable. The Xel'Nari were breaking. He could see it in their erratic movements, in the desperate way they tried to retreat. They had come expecting an easy victory. Now they were running for their lives. "Pursue the survivors," Carter ordered. "Make sure they understand the cost of challenging humanity." The Valiant moved forward, relentless, unstoppable. The battle was over, but the lesson was just beginning. Across the stars, the story would spread of a lone human warship that had faced an entire fleet and emerged victorious. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The Xel'Nari fleet loomed in the darkness, hundreds of warships spread out like a wall of death, their weapons glowing with barely contained energy. The vastness of space had never seen such an overwhelming force gathered in a single place, all for the destruction of one lone human warship. From their command decks, the Xel'Nari admirals observed the HSS Valiant, a single black dot against the endless void. It was motionless, unshaken by the sheer might facing it. The arrogance of humans, they thought, to not even attempt an escape. It would be their final mistake. With a single command, the Xel'Nari fleet unleashed their full power, and space itself burned. A wave of energy surged forward, plasma bolts as bright as miniature suns, missiles packed with destructive warheads, and ion beams designed to rip through the strongest defenses. The combined firepower was enough to destroy an entire planet, enough to ensure no trace of the Valiant remained. The Xel'Nari did not believe in mercy. Their enemies were to be erased, utterly and completely. Yet, as the weapons closed in, something unexpected happened. The Valiant did not explode. It did not even shake. The energy blasts struck an invisible barrier, vanishing into nothingness, as if the ship was shielded by an impenetrable force. The missiles, programmed to track and destroy, suddenly lost their targets, spiraling off course before detonating harmlessly in the void. The Xel'Nari's most powerful beams, capable of cutting through entire warships, flickered and dissipated before they could reach their mark. For the first time, silence filled the Xel'Nari command deck. Their supreme firepower, the very thing that had crushed civilizations, had done nothing. It was impossible. It was against every rule of war they had ever known. Confusion turned into disbelief. Had their weapons malfunctioned? Had the humans somehow interfered with their systems? Grand Admiral Xervas bared his fangs, his claws curling into the metal of his command throne. "Fire again," he growled, his voice filled with fury. "This time, overload the weapons. I want that ship turned to dust." His fleet obeyed without question. The void burned once more, this time with even greater intensity. But the result was the same. The Valiant remained unharmed. Aboard the human warship, Captain Elias Carter watched the enemy's desperate attempts with calm indifference. The Xel'Nari had expected an easy fight, had believed numbers would guarantee their victory. They did not understand what they were facing. The Valiant was not just another warship, it was humanity's greatest creation, built with technology beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Its shields, powered by advanced energy dispersal fields, rendered enemy weapons useless. Its targeting systems could lock onto weak points with terrifying precision. And its weapons. Carter allowed himself a small smirk. The Xel'Nari were about to learn just how wrong they had been. "Target their command ship," he ordered, his voice steady. One shot. The Valiant's primary weapon hummed to life, a railgun so advanced that it could accelerate a projectile to near light speed within seconds. The ship's AI calculated the perfect trajectory, accounting for distance, movement, and enemy defenses. Then, in an instant, the weapon fired. There was no grand display of energy, no bright explosion upon launch, just a single silent shot cutting through the void. The Xel'Nari barely had time to react before their command ship exploded. The projectile struck the warship's core, piercing its reinforced hull as if it were made of paper. The kinetic force alone was enough to rip through the ship from end to end. One moment, the massive flagship was there; the next, it was gone, torn apart by an invisible force too fast for the eye to follow. The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the fleet, debris scattering in all directions. The Xel'Nari command deck was filled with stunned silence. Their flagship, the pride of their armada, the very symbol of their military dominance, had been destroyed in a single strike. Panic spread like wildfire. The remaining admirals shouted conflicting orders, confusion turning into chaos. The Xel'Nari had never experienced such a thing before. No enemy had ever destroyed one of their capital ships so effortlessly. Their formations, once perfect and disciplined, began to waver. Some ships instinctively pulled back, their commanders fearing they would be next. Others hesitated, unable to process the reality of what had just happened. The Valiant remained still, its dark hull almost mocking them. It had barely moved. It had barely fired. And yet, it had already broken them. Captain Carter observed the battlefield, his expression unreadable. He knew what was happening inside the enemy ships. Fear had taken hold. The Xel'Nari, for all their arrogance, had never truly tasted defeat. They had never fought an opponent who could strike them down so effortlessly. And that fear would only grow. The humans had not just fought back, they had shown the galaxy that even the strongest empire could fall. "Target the next ship," Carter ordered, his voice quiet but firm. "Let's remind them who they're dealing with." The Valiant powered up again, preparing to fire. The Xel'Nari fleet, once invincible, now faced an undeniable truth: they had challenged humanity. And they had made a terrible mistake. The void of space was silent, yet the battlefield told a different story. Wreckage drifted aimlessly, shattered remains of what had once been an unstoppable Xel'Nari fleet. Fires flickered in the oxygen leaks of broken warships, casting eerie glows against the darkness. The once mighty armada, feared across the galaxy, had been reduced to nothing more than debris. And at the center of it all, untouched and unmoving, was the HFY Valiant, the lone human warship standing victorious against an empire's full might. Captain Elias Carter sat in his command chair, his face calm, his eyes focused. The battle was over, but the echoes of destruction remained. The Xel'Nari had come to crush humanity, to wipe out its defenses with overwhelming force. They had believed in their superiority, in their sheer numbers and firepower. And now, all that remained of their once mighty fleet was wreckage floating in the void. Their arrogance had blinded them. They had never expected a human warship to stand against them. They had never imagined a single ship could turn the tide of war. But the Valiant was not just a ship. It was a weapon of vengeance, a symbol of human resilience, and a testament to the fact that numbers alone did not guarantee victory. The remaining Xel'Nari warships, the few that had survived, floated in place, their commanders paralyzed by indecision. They had lost their admirals, their flagships, their entire battle plan shattered in an instant. Every strategy they had relied on, every advantage they had believed in, had been turned against them. The Valiant's weapons had been too precise, its shields too strong, its technology beyond anything they had prepared for. They had been slaughtered without mercy, their proudest warships turned into burning husks within moments. And now, those who remained faced a choice: fight and be annihilated, or flee and live with the shame of their defeat. Carter leaned forward slightly, his voice steady as he spoke. "Open a channel." The communications officer nodded, activating the long-range broadcast. The remaining Xel'Nari ships would hear him now. They would hear his words, just as they had heard the screams of their dying comrades moments before. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the HFY Valiant," he said, his voice carrying across the empty void. "Your fleet is gone. Your commanders are dead. Your empire thought it could destroy humanity in a single strike. You were wrong." There was no response, but he knew they were listening. "I give you one chance," Carter continued. "Surrender or run. If you choose to fight, I will finish what I started. I will not ask again." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, movement. One by one, the remaining Xel'Nari ships turned away, activating their faster-than-light drives. They were retreating. The same fleet that had come to exterminate humanity was now fleeing like wounded animals, abandoning their pride in the face of total destruction. Carter watched as they vanished into the void, knowing that the story of this battle would spread across the stars. The Xel'Nari had suffered a defeat unlike any in their history. They had never lost before. And now, they had been crushed in the most humiliating way possible. The bridge crew of the Valiant remained silent, watching as their enemies disappeared. They had won. Not just a battle, but something far greater. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. That humans were not prey to be hunted. That if pushed into a corner, humanity would strike back with a force no empire could withstand. Carter exhaled slowly, his grip on the command chair easing slightly. The war was not over. The Xel'Nari would not forget this day. They would regroup, rebuild, and return. But now, they would return with fear in their hearts. They would know that humanity was not weak. They would know that one warship, one lone defender, had shattered their invincible fleet. And the next time they thought of war, they would remember the crushing defeat. The wreckage of the Xel'Nari fleet drifted silently in the vastness of space, a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered warships. Fires still burned in the oxygen leaks of broken vessels, casting eerie shadows over the battlefield. The once mighty armada, feared by civilizations across the stars, had been reduced to nothing but debris. And at the center of it all, untouched, standing victorious, was the HFY Valiant. A single human warship had done the impossible. It had not only survived an attack by the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, but it had crushed them so completely that the survivors had fled in terror. The galaxy would not remain silent after this battle. The story of this defeat would spread, reaching every corner of space. And Captain Elias Carter knew exactly what message needed to be sent. He sat in his command chair, watching the remains of his enemies float through the void. His crew worked efficiently around him, but there was a weight in the air, an unspoken understanding of what had just happened. They had won, but this was bigger than just a battle. This was a moment that would change everything. The Xel'Nari, the most dominant force in the known universe, had been humiliated in a way no one thought possible. And now, it was time to make sure everyone knew it. "Open a channel," Carter ordered, his voice calm but firm. His communications officer nodded, activating the long-range broadcast system. This wasn't just a message for the Xel'Nari. This was a message for every species, every empire, every race that had ever feared the Xel'Nari's rule. The time for silence was over. The truth had to be spoken. This is Captain Elias Carter of the HSS. Valiant, he began, his voice echoing across the stars. To all those who are listening, to every world that has lived under the shadow of the Xel'Nari Empire, hear these words. The invincible fleet of the Xel'Nari is no more. Their strongest warships, their greatest commanders, their most advanced weapons, all destroyed. A single human warship stood against them, and they were defeated. The silence that followed was deafening. Carter continued, his words slow and deliberate. For too long, the Xel'Nari have crushed anyone who dared to oppose them. They have enslaved, conquered, and destroyed without mercy. They believe themselves untouchable. Today, that belief is shattered. He let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. Let this be a warning. To the Xel'Nari, your time of unquestioned rule is over. And to the rest of the galaxy, rise. You are not powerless. You are not alone. Humanity stands. And we do not stand alone. The message ended, but its impact had only begun. Across the stars, planets that had once cowered in fear now saw a spark of hope. The Xel'Nari had been beaten. Their strongest fleet had been turned to dust. And if they could fall once, they could fall again. Rebellions that had once seemed impossible now became real. Empires that had bowed to the Xel'Nari's might now reconsidered their allegiances. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in an instant, all because one human warship had dared to defy the impossible. Aboard the Valiant, Carter leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. He knew what would come next. The Xel'Nari would not forget this humiliation. They would return, stronger, angrier, more desperate than ever. But they would return to a galaxy that no longer feared them. They would return to a war they could no longer control. And humanity would be ready. The Valiant had not just won a battle. It had changed the course of history. And the message to the galaxy was clear. Humanity had arrived, and it was here to stay.